it came to pass when the king had heard the words of the law that he rent his clothes, because it had been so long since the law of God had been read in Israel, in Judah there. And they discovered the law, and he read it, and he immediately tore his clothes. Why would he do that? Any ideas why he would do that? Why would he tear his clothes like that? He's just appalled at the state of Israel and at how much they must have been breaking the law and missing the Sabbaths and all the other things that were going on, that as a repentant sign to God, he tore his clothes, ripped his beautiful clothes, and just, basically got down on his knees before God and let him know how sorrowful he felt about this. And so he gets involved and asks them to go inquire of the Lord concerning the words of the book that was found in the temple when they were restoring the temple and cleaning the temple. And a prophetess of Israel explained, because of all this, that God would bring evil upon the land for all the sins that had been there. And why? Because they had forsaken God, they had burned incense to other gods. And so in verse 25, that they might provoke him to anger. And so his wrath was to be poured out upon this place and would not be quenched. However, as far as the king of Judah, that God would gather him later into his bosom. He would favor Josiah and keep him even in death until the very end times for a resurrection. So a very favorable look upon Josiah. He said in verse 27, because thine heart was tender, and thou didst humble thyself before God, when thou heardest his words against this place and against the inhabitants thereof, and humblest thyself before me, and didst rend thy clothes, and weep before me, I have even heard thee also, saith the Lord. And I will gather thee to thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered to thy grave in peace. Neither shall thine eyes see all this evil that I will bring upon this place. And so that was what was told to the king. Really, really, really something. Well, Josiah really did a good work. We can see the cleansing of the land. We can see some of the things that they had in Israel. They had the 2 golden calves. They even had the planets. He had to take out of God's house, out of the temple, he had to take groves out of the temple too. Did you know that? He took the groves right out of the temple. What do you think a grove would be in the temple? Any ideas? A tree in the temple. They had a tree in the temple. All right, let's turn to 2 Kings chapter 23. 2 Kings 23, verse 4, and the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the door, to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal and for the grove. So they made all these vessels for this false god Baal, and for this grove in the temple. And he brought out those vessels from God's temple. They were also made for all the host of heaven. And he burned them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel. Alright, so right in the temple was these vessels for Baal and for Baal's grove. I want you to think about this. There was a grove made just for Baal. So there was a tree in the temple for this false god Baal during Josiah's reign. And all the kings before Josiah had been worshiping this god Baal with the tree inside the temple in Jerusalem. And with all these dishes. And read on. And he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the city of Judah and in the places round about Jerusalem, them also that burn incense unto Baal, to the sun and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the host of heaven. So they worship the sun, they worship the moon, and they worship all the host of heaven. And here in verse 6, and he brought out the grove from the house of the Lord. So he's bringing out this tree out of the house of God, without Jerusalem, unto the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron. So we know it must have been a pretty big tree if he has to drag it out like this and burn it like this. This is not some tiny little bush. And stamped it into small powder, and cast the powder thereof upon the graves of the children of the people. Now he breaks down the houses of the Sodomites that were next to the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the grove. So right next to the house of the Lord, there was women living, Sodomite women living, and their function was to weave decorations that went on the grove. So this tree in the temple, this Baal tree, was used to hang decorations on. And all the host of heaven was worshipped on this tree. The sun would have been worshipped on the top. The moon would have been worshipped with a round decoration. The planets also worship like round decorations. All that in the temple of God. And for God, it was an abomination. Is there anything like that today? Have we seen any tree worshipped this way? Yes, we have. But it's funny that today it's tied in with Jesus. And today it's looked at as a good thing. But well before Jesus' time, it was already a practice in Israel. And it was a practice that was held as false idolatry. And it was offensive to God. And that God would have to bring his judgment upon the land, because that tree was in the temple of God. So let us never bring a tree like that into our temple. And let us never decorate it like that. And let us never worship like that, thinking we are giving honor to Jesus. Because this tree is a tree of Baal that has a history stooped way, way back in the Bible. I hope our children can have the same wisdom that Josiah had. At 8 years old, he showed the wisdom of God. He was able to put out things in his life that were not pleasing to God. And I hope that we all can do the same thing. May God bless you.
Amen.